Hey guys, it's Daniel. Welcome back.
The following is from Keith Richards' biography, Life. If you would like to see my interview with Rolling Stones recording engineer Tapani Tallow, where he talks about the making of It's Only Rock and Roll, stories about Mick Taylor, Keith Richards, Mick Jagger, and more, the link is available below. As per the Keith Richards quote, here it is. Quote, "It's amazing that the music we made is still going, given that record wasn't even highly rated as it first came out. The outtakes of Exile on Main Street were released as part of a reissue in 2010. The music was recorded in 1971. Rocks Off, Happy, Ventilator Blues, Tumbling Dice, all down the line. That's 5-string open tuning to the max. I was starting to really fix my trademark. I wrote all that stuff within a few days. Suddenly, with the 5-string, songs were just dripping off of my fingers. My first real exercise on 5-string was Honky Tonk Woman a couple of years before. At that time, it was, well, this is interesting. There was Brown Sugar 2, which came out the month we quit England. By the time we got to working on Exile, I was really starting to find all these other moves and how to make minor chords and suspended chords. I discovered that the 5-string becomes very interesting when you add a capo, up on the 5th or the 7th fret. But it also gives a certain ring, a certain resonance that can't be obtained really by any other way. But it's when to use it and when not to overdo it. If it's Mick's song to start with, I won't start off with a 5-string. I'll start on a regular tuning and just learn it or feel my way around it, classico style. And then if Charlie ups the rhythm a little bit or gives a different feel, I'll say, let me put this to 5-string for a moment and see how it alters the structure of the thing. Obviously doing that simplifies the sound in that you're limiting yourself to the set thing. But if you find the right one like Start Me Up, it creates the song. I've heard millions of bands try to play Start Me Up with regular tuning. It just won't work, pal. We brought a lot of stuff to the Nelcote mansion in southern France that had been incubating for a while. We recorded the record in the basement of Nelcote. I would farm out the title of the idea. This song is called All Down the Line. Mick, I hear it coming all down the line. Off you go. I was coming up with a couple of new songs a day, and one would work and one wouldn't. Mick kept up with the writing at this phenomenal pace. Very canny rock and roll lyrics with those catchy phrases and repetitions. All Down the Line came directly out of Brown Sugar, which Mick wrote. Most of what I had to do was come up with riffs and ideas that would turn Mick on, to write songs he could handle. They had to be good records, but translatable to being played on stage. I was the butcher cutting the meat, and sometimes he didn't like it. He didn't like Rip This Joint, it was too fast. In terms of beats per minute, it's something like a world record. Maybe Little Richard had done something faster, but in any case, nobody was looking to beat the world record. Some of the titles of the songs we wrote that never made it on the album are bizarre. Head in the Toilet Blues, Leather Jackets, Windmill, I Was Just a Country Boy, Dancing in the Light. That must have been one of Mick's. Bent Green Needles, Labor Pains, Pomme de Terre. Well, we were in France at the time. We wrote Torn and Frayed, which is not often played and has some topical interest. Apart from Sister Morphine and a few odd references to coke, we never really wrote about drugs. They would only crop up in songs as they did in real life, here and there. There were always rumors and folklore about songs, who they were written for, what they were really about. Flash was alleged to be about heroin, and I see the connotation, the reference to Jack, but Jumpin' Jack Flash has nothing to do with heroin. The myths go deep, though. Whatever you write, somebody is going to interpret it in some other way, see codes buried in the lyrics. Tumbling Dice may have had something to do with the gambling den that Nellicote turned into. There were card games and roulette wheels. Monte Carlo was around the corner. Bobby Keys and Cats did go down there once or twice. We did play dice. I credit Mick with Tumbling Dice, but the song had to make the transition from its earlier form, which was called Good Time Woman. You might have all of the music, a great riff, but sometimes the subject matter is missing. It only takes one guy sitting around a room saying, throwing the crabs last night, for a song to be born. Got to roll me. Songs are strange things. Little notes like that. If they stick, they stick. With most of the songs I've ever written, quite honestly, I felt there's an enormous gap here, waiting to be filled. This song should have been written hundreds of years ago. How did nobody pick up on that little space? Half the time you're looking for gaps that other people haven't done. And you say, I don't believe they missed that hole. It's so obvious, it was there staring you in the face. I pick out the holes. I realize now that Exile was made under very chaotic circumstances and with innovative ways of recording, but those seem to be the least of the problems. The most pressing problem was, do we have songs and do we get the sound? Anything else that went on was peripheral. You could hear a load of my outtakes ending, oh well, run out, that's the story so far. But you'd be surprised when you're put right on the ball and you're got to do something and everybody's looking at you going, okay, what's going to happen? You put yourself up there on the firing line. Give me a blindfold and a last cigarette and let's go. And you'd be surprised how much comes out of you before you die. especially when you're fooling the rest of the band who think you know exactly what you're going to do and you know you're blind as a bat and have no idea. But you're just going to trust yourself. Something's going to come. You come out with one line, throw in a guitar line, and then another line's got to come out. This is where supposedly your talent lies. It's not in trying to meticulously work out how to build a Spitfire. Maybe I would crash out, if I crash out at all, around 10 in the morning, get up around 4 in the afternoon, subject to the usual variations. Nobody's going to arrive until sunset anyway. So then I had a couple of hours to think about or play back what we did last night, so I could pick it up where we left off. Or if we had it already, it was a matter of what to do when the guys arrived a little later. And you sometimes start to panic when you realize you have nothing to offer them. It's always that feeling when these guys are expecting material as if it comes from the gods. Whereas the reality is it comes from Mick or me. When you see the documentary on EXILE, it gives an impression of jamming away spontaneously for hours in the bunker until we've got something, until we're ready to go for a take. As if we're trusting to incoming from the ether. That's the way it's been portrayed, and some of it might have happened that way, but ask Mick. He and I would look at each other like, what do we give them today? What ammo do we put in today, baby? Because we know everybody is going to get along with this as long as there's a song, there's something to play. We might have occasionally lapsed and decided to overdub something we did yesterday. But basically, Mick and I both felt it was our duty to come up with a new song, a new riff, a new idea, or two, preferably. We were prolific. We felt that it was impossible that we couldn't come up with something every day or every 2 days. That was what we did, and even if it was the bare bones of a riff, it was something to go on. And then while they were trying to get the sound on it, or we were trying to shape the riff, the song would fall into place on its own volition. Once you're on a roll with the first few chords, the first idea of the rhythm, you can figure out the other things. Like, does it need a bridge in the middle later? It was living on a knife edge as far as that's concerned. There was no preparation, but that's not the point. That's rock and roll. The idea is to make the bare bones of a riff, snap the drums in, and see what happens. And it was the immediacy of it that, in retrospect, made it even more interesting. There was no time for too much reflection, for plowing the field twice. It goes like this, and see what comes out. And this is when you realize that with a good band, you only really need a little spark of an idea, and before the evening's over, it'll be a beautiful thing. We did dry out. Casino Boogie came out of when Mick and I had just about run ourselves ragged. Mick's looking at me, and I go, I don't know. And it came to my mind the old Bill Burroughs cut-up method. Let's rip headlines out of newspapers and pages out of a book and throw them together on the floor and see what comes up. Hey, we're obviously in no mood to write a song in the usual fashion, so let's use somebody else's method. And it worked on Casino Boogie. I'm surprised we haven't used it since, quite honestly. But at the time, it was desperation. One phrase bounces off another, and suddenly it makes sense even though they're totally disconnected. But they have the same feel about them, which is a fair definition of writing a rock or a pop lyric anyway. I remember being a little dismayed that Charlie had decided to live 3 hours away. I would have loved to have Charlie around the corner so I could call him and say, got an idea, can you pop by? But the way Charlie wanted to live and where he wanted to live was in fact about 130 miles away, in the Vaucluse above Aix-en-Provence, so he would come down from Monday till Friday, so then I had him there, but I could have used a little more. And Mick was a lot of the time in Paris. The only thing I was afraid of on EXILE was that with people living so far away, it would break their concentration. And once I'd gotten them there, I wanted them for the duration. I'd never lived on top of the work before, but once I said, dang, the rest of you better get used to it. Screw it, I'm doing it, and I've committed my house to it. If I can do it, you can all get a little closer. To Charlie, it was an absolute no-no. He has an artistic temperament. It's just uncool for him to live down in the south of France on the Côte d'Azur in the summer. Too much society going on and too much blah blah. I can understand totally. Charlie's the kind of guy that would go down in winter when it's horrible and empty. He found where he wanted to live, and it certainly wasn't Cannes, Nice, Juan-les-Pins, Cap Ferret, or Monte Carlo. Charlie cringes from places like that. One sublime example of a song winging in from the ether is Happy. We did that in an afternoon, in only 4 hours, cut and done. At noon it had never existed. At 4 o'clock it was on tape. It was no Rolling Stones record. It's got the name on it, but it was actually Jimmy Miller on drums, Bobby Keys on baritone, and that was basically it. And then I overdubbed bass and guitar. We were just waiting for everybody to turn up for the real sessions for the rest of the night, and we thought, we're here. Let's see if we can come up with something. I'd written it that day. We got something going, we were rocking, everything was set up, and so we said, well, let's start to work it down, and then we'll probably hit it with the guys later. I decided to go on the 5-string with the slide, and suddenly there it was. Just like that. By the time they got there, we had it. Once you have something, you just let it fly. It just came tripping off the tongue, then and there. When you're writing this stuff, you've got to put your face in front of the microphone and spit it out. I wrote the verses of Happy, but I don't know where they came from. Never got a lift out of Learjet, when can I fly back home? It was just alliteration, trying to set up a story. There has to be some thin plotline, although in a lot of my songs you'd be very hard-pressed to find it. But here you're broke and it's evening, and you want to go out but you ain't got nothing. I'm busted before I start. I need a love to keep me happy because if it's a real love, it'll be free. Don't have to pay for it. I need a love to keep me happy because I've spent the money and I have none left and it's nighttime and I'm looking to have a good time but I ain't got nothing. So, I need love to keep me happy. Baby, baby, won't you keep me happy? I'd have been happier if more came out like Happy. It goes like this. Great songs write themselves. You're just being led by the nose or the ears. The skill is not to interfere with it too much. Ignore intelligence, ignore everything. Just follow where it takes you. You really have no say in it and suddenly there it is. Oh, I know how this goes. And you can't believe it because you think that nothing comes like that. You think, where did I steal this from? No, that's original. Well, about as original as I can get. And you realize that songs write themselves. You're just the conveyor. Not to say I haven't labored. Some of them had us on our knees. Some are about 35 years old and I've not quite finished them yet. You can write the song, but that's not the whole deal. The thing is what kind of sound, what tempo, and what key is everybody really into? Tumbling Dice took a few days to get right. I remember working on that intro for several afternoons. When you're listening to music, you can tell how much calculation has gone into it and how much is free flow. You can't do the free flow all the time, and it's really a matter of how much calculation and how little you can put into it, rather than the other way round. Well, I've got to tame this beast one way or another, but how to tame it? Gently or to give it a beating? You have this sort of relationship with the songs. You ain't finished till you're finished, okay? All that sort of stuff. You talk to the songs. No, you weren't supposed to go there. Or sometimes you're apologizing. I'm sorry about that. No, that was certainly not the way to go. They're funny things. They're babies. A song should come from the heart. I never had to think about it. I just pick up the guitar or go to the piano and let the stuff come to me. Something would arrive, incoming. And if I didn't, I'd play somebody else's songs. And I've never really had to get to the point of saying, I'm now going to write a song. I've never, ever done that. When I first knew I could do it, I wondered if I could do another one. Then I found they were rolling off my fingers like pearls. I never had any difficulty in writing songs. It was a sheer pleasure, and a wonderful gift that I didn't know I had. It amazes me.